Welcome back to the Generation Optimistic podcast.
Aw.
My name is Hannah Guillory, and today I have probably one of my biggest guests that I've
Aw.
had on my show yet.
Whoop, whoop, whoop,
I
whoop,
had
whoop.
the amazing, multi-talented
Aw.
Miss Frankie Darcell, everyone.
And the crowd
Clap
said,
it up.
yay! They're all standing up. You can't see the crowd in the
I
background.
know, but they're
Hi,
here.
Hannah.
How are you?
I'm well. Welcome to the iHeartRadio Philadelphia
you
studios.
so much for having me.
Wow.
You guys can see in the back. We're
Yeah.
legit.
We're legit.
We've moved up. We've
This
elevated.
is the real thing. This is the top of the food chain.
I know.
You
and
can't
we're
get
here.
closer to excellence than iHeartMedia,
But thank
the
you so
largest
much.
media entertainment radio company and platform in the country.
No, it's
and you're in
crazy.
one of our major studios.
Thank you so much for having us. So, for those who don't know, Miss Frankie Darcell, she is a proud alumni of the Morgan State University, everyone.
Say that part again.
The national
Yes.
treasure.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Morgan State University. So, I just want to talk a little bit about, for those who don't know, she was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame. Guys, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I honestly, I didn't know this before, but you play basketball all through your time at
Mhm.
Morgan State. But clearly, sports is not where you're at right now.
Right.
So let's talk about how you started and how you moved to, journalism communication.
Yeah. It was actually at Morgan. So when I graduated from high school, and decided I was attending Morgan State University, I was a anatomy and physiology major.
Really?
I wanted to be a sports trainer. I love sports, wanted to be a sports trainer. And so I was anatomy and physiology. Went through my freshman year, sophomore year, and then I had anatomy and physiology. And I walked into the room, and in the lab, he had squirrels on the table. And I was like, well, what is this for? He said, you've got to find the joints. You have to find the arteries and the veins. I'm like, that's not going to work
Absolutely
for me.
not. Yeah.
This is not, you're going to fail this class if you don't, get through this lab. My angst, I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, I didn't do blood and guts well. And so I decided at that moment that I was going to fail that class. And my next class in Holmes Hall was...
Shout out Holmes Hall.
Good old Holmes Hall, honey. Where WEAA used to be housed.
Oh, it was in Holmes Hall
It was,
before.
honey, yeah, let me give you some history.
I know that's right.
It was in Holmes Hall, and I had a speech communications class. At the time, Kwaisi Mfume, who is now on our board and serves as an honorable congressional member in the House of Representatives in Washington, who's also a Morgan State University grad, had a show called Two-Way Talk. And I was walking down the hall, and I was like,
What this is?
what they doing in there? And I was like, I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
And after class, I went into the radio station, said hi, and introduced myself. And I said, can I just come and help?
Yeah.
He said, that's called an internship. I was like, I can do that
No,
too.
it's the same still.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so I went in, and he was so gracious in
Mhm.
helping me. And I switched my major and started majoring in telecommunications is what it was called at the time. And then I started doing an air shift on the weekends.
So, what
Yeah.
year or what classification were you in?
I was actually a junior, first semester junior. So I was late in the game.
Oh, you were late.
I was late in the game. So I ended up graduating a year later, which was okay.
That's fine, yeah.
And I ended up going to summer school for 2 straight summers to be able to play catch up.
Make up.
Yeah,
for
because
it.
I did major in bridge too, back in the day. We used to hang out on the bridge all the time. I was
No,
like, I
that's
don't
right.
get credits for hanging out on the bridge. They were like, no, ma'am. So I ended up staying, an additional year, but it was well worth it. And I would not change it for the world. Radio, television, and entertainment, I was made for it. So
So,
yeah.
what was your, I would say, dream or goal once you changed to telecommunications from being an athlete playing basketball? Was your dream like, oh, I'm going to do sports and radio, kind of like mix the 2, or were you interested in other things?
never was interested in doing sports broadcasting. My sports career,
Yeah, same. Not
is
that
what it
either.
was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I never wanted to be like a sports anchor. Never wanted to be on television.
Yeah.
Radio was what I wanted to do. And, to God be the glory, it's 38 years I've been doing it straight, consistently. I've branched off and did some other things in terms of starting a business about 20 years ago. But radio was my thing. So radio and entertainment was always my thing. I've done some television by virtue of just being in
Yeah.
entertainment, but radio is
Radio is
absolutely,
where it's at.
what I've enjoyed doing.
So right after you left Morgan, what did you do?
So, which is why I tell young people all the time, network. The
Yeah.
fact that you're here, the fact that you're networking with me, my mama, God rest her soul, knew the uncle of the program director at a small radio station in Norfolk, Virginia. He's like, my daughter's graduating, she needs a job. And he had gone to Morgan. So
Okay.
he called the program director. I went down, I interviewed a little small AM radio station when AM was still
Was a
a big
thing,
thing,
yep.
was a thing. And that's how I got my first job at WRAP in Norfolk, Virginia. I was working overnights, but I had a job. I was making $75 a week. My daddy was like, you know how much we pay for your education? You make $75 a week? But I loved radio so much, I knew
Yeah.
that I had a career. And I was going to put my, the pedal to the metal and really focus on being in radio. And my dad was in Charlotte, North Carolina when I finally got hired in Charlotte, when I got my first big job in Charlotte. And I took him to dinner and paid for it. I said, see, it paid itself
See,
off.
look, yeah.
It paid off. Because he's like, you need to do something different. I was like, no, I'm going to make this thing work. And I did.
So when in that, like, from you graduating to starting there, what moment in that part of your career did your passion like really come out? Because I know you said from
Yeah.
WEA to then you knew you wanted to do it, but because like someone like me, right? I wanted to do music first. That was my major first. Shout out music majors, but I wanted to do music first, and then I found out that my major now kind of tied to more what I was more passionate about.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what moment kind of like fueled your
When I
passion.
got fired the first time, and
Okay.
you really don't grow in this business until you get
Get
fired.
those no's, yeah.
So I got fired for the first time, and I didn't give up. I knew that then that this is what I wanted to do, right? And it was just a natural for me. I say every day it's all in divine order, right? You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I just knew I was going to make it work because I had such a love for it. And there's a cliche, when you love what you do, you'll never work a day
Never
in your
work
life.
a day in your life.
That's
Amen.
not true, but it sounds good. But
Yeah.
but when you do love what you do and you're passionate about what you're doing, the no's don't hurt as much, right? It's not easy to give up when you hear no. And I don't care what you do for a profession. No is going to come your way. But when you love what you do and it's in your angst, right, you're going to make it work.
So for all my Detroit people out there,
Hey, what up, though?
I know you see it. So Miss Frankie, you did Detroit radio for 25 years?
25, 26 years, yeah.
From when you had your first job, what was the timeline from there to then Detroit?
So the journey was Norfolk, Virginia to Raleigh, Durham. From Raleigh, Durham to Charlotte, North Carolina. In Charlotte for a couple of years. So in 92, I moved to Detroit. And my exit from Detroit was in 2020. So do the math. What was that? Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
y'all do the math.
And the cool thing was that I had the opportunity, and I strategized what I wanted to do and how I was going to get there. My goal, and I think you asked something similar about, what I knew I was going to do. I wanted to work in major market radio.
Yeah.
It's the top of the food chain. So I knew from Norfolk to Raleigh-Durham, which is small market, then Raleigh-Durham to Charlotte, which was the largest radio station in the Carolinas, we called it at the time, and then from Charlotte to Detroit, and from Detroit to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So when you talk about major cities, so I accomplished my goal. And now, being in Philadelphia and on a number of radio stations around the country on the weekend, I accomplished my goal. And I had a plan. I executed that plan. I put in the work. I put in the time. And now I'm in one of the largest markets in the country.
So in Detroit, did you do more coverage of politics, or did you do like a mixture?
I did it all.
Okay.
So I wanted to be able to talk about what my listeners were talking about.
Yeah.
If the listeners were talking about, the dog that crossed the street, I'm talking about the dog that crossed the street. If everybody was into the election, then I would
That's
be
what you
into
were
the
talking
election.
about.
I got to say this too, as it relates to Morgan State University. So, um, uh, Dr. Kennedy was the dean of our department at the time, and Coach Earl, who's still, he retired, but he's still very involved. One of the things I knew attending an HBCU, and this is what I love about it, you get an excellent education, and at that time, during the 70s and early 80s, we knew that we wanted to be able to be fair, equitable, in the coverage of the Black community where we lived, worked, and served. And that I knew I would never compromise the power of that microphone to influence our community. Yeah, I want to entertain, and I could tell the best joke, but I also wanted to empower and inform my community. So I was able to infuse a Luther Vandross, Patti LaBelle interview, and then come back and speak to the President of the United States, then talk about, what happened on 7 Mile, right? You got me?
Yes.
Right? And so I talk about what my audience is interested in talking about. I engage them in those things and always wanted to make sure that my audience had the information they use to empower their life. So I might say, hey, just so you all know, the COVID shots, they've got them at, XYZ place. Oh, wow, I hadn't gotten it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just always wanted to do all that. You talk about more than one thing in a day.
Yeah.
As a talent on the air, I wanted to be that too. So when something happened, I wanted to be, let me see what Frankie is saying about it. Pam. So that's what I did.
So when I think of you, being an advocate for people on the radio, behind the scenes and everything, when you're interviewing people, as big as the president, the mayor, how do you are you ever nervous or anything?
Let me say this. Yes.
Okay.
Every time I take the stage, I'm nervous.
That's literally me. I was nervous to come here today.
Oh, bless your heart. And nervous is an indication of how well you're going to do. People say, I'm not scared at all. You should be.
A little bit.
Because you never know what's going to happen. But I want to share this really quickly. So I've interviewed 3 of the last 4 presidents. Huge, right? One of the first in the country to interview Kamala Harris, the Honorable Vice President Kamala Harris. But it was in Detroit when General Motors and Chrysler took a loan, right? And everybody nationally, don't give Detroit the money, yada, yada. Well, they paid the money back early. And I got a phone call from the White House. The president was going to be at the University of Michigan, and he wanted to speak to me about the big 3, the 2 of the big 3 paying the money back, right? I was scared because it had a lot of intricacies. I called the gentleman who worked at Chrysler. I was on the phone from 11 p.m. to 7 o'clock in the morning, dotting my I's, crossing my T's. Well, what was the loan about? How much was it? When were you supposed to pay it back? Who was the one that signed? We went over all of that. I'm talking like 7 or 8 hours. My interview with the president was pre-recorded, scheduled for 10 a.m. I was a basket case because I didn't sleep that much. However, when I got the president on the phone, when he called, that interview was only 4.5 minutes.
Yeah.
I spent 7.5 hours
to prepare
for 4.5 minutes. But I was prepared. And when the president said X, Y, and Z, I responded. I said, well, Mr. President, X, Y, and Z. He said, absolutely. And you know what? Now, I was only supposed to be with him for 3. He stayed an additional minute and a half because I was engaging with him. And when I said, yeah, I spoke with, so he's like, oh, wow, good man.
Yeah.
So I was prepared. And that interview is probably one that was the most nerving of my, and I've had several. I mean, I'm just saying big
Shout
ones.
out. Big
right?
turn,
Big ones. But it was the president it was the interview with former President Obama about paying the two automotive companies, paying back that loan early. That was big news. That was international news. And that interview got picked up by a couple of networks. And if social media then was what it was today, I'd have got a check from YouTube. Is that how they go? I'd have got a check. I'd have got that Shay Shay check.
It's it's funny because I met him. Shout out to my HBCU, So I got to meet him for the Rustin movie premiere that they had. He's one of the executive producers, him and Michelle Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was front row, and I saw him come out. I was like, because like for people who know me, he's my screensaver. So I'm like, this man is in real life.
Right.
But it's so funny because I was just so nervous just to see him. But you got to talk to him. So
several times. And you know what was interesting? So I met him when he was a senator.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to the Honorable Congressman John Conyers, former 13th Congressional District. I lived in his district in Detroit. He was the first one to say, he said, Frankie, I met a senator who's going to be the first black president of the United. I'm like, Congressman, who is that? He said, his name is Barack Obama. He's out of Chicago. I'm like, So I went to the Congressional Black Caucus in D.C., and I'm standing there speaking with former Mayor Kilpatrick and the Honorable Congresswoman Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, and this guy walks into the conversation. It was Senator Barack Obama. And Congressman John Conyers, God rest his soul, said, Frankie, I want you to meet Senator Obama. I was like, oh, it's a pleasure. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. So I'm watching. And then he speaks at the Democratic National Convention. I'm like, oh, this dude is on to something. He is fire.
Yeah.
And then, he started going through the campaign, and then he got the nomination. And I mean, he went from, his stock went up like crazy and ultimately became the president. Now, what we've done in media is we've said, especially at that time, oh, I've interviewed President Obama. Wait a minute. Did you interview the senator?
I know that's right.
Or did you interview the president?
Come on now.
Because he was accessible when he was a senator.
Yeah.
The line got a little shorter
once he
became the president, right? So the running thing was, did you interview the senator or the president? Let me be clear. I interviewed the senator twice and the president 3 times. So that meant something. I'm just saying.
But one interview I do want to talk about that I just learned is you interviewed Bill Cosby.
I did, Dara.
Great. You were the first person he called.
First one.
I think that is
in the car out of prison.
So how does that, like, when someone like that calls you personally, wanting you to share their story, how does that make you feel just from when you first started, from Morgan, WEA, to that point?
So shout out to Andrew Wyatt. And for people who watched Mr. Cosby, and you would see him walking, there was a guy holding his arm. Yeah. Right? With glasses. That's Andrew Wyatt. And because they were here in Pennsylvania, and it happened right here in Montgomery County, so when they say where it was, the trial was here in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And so I covered the entire piece, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's doing all these interviews. So literally I got in my car, and I drove out. I'm standing there with the press corps, everybody else. I'm like, hey, dude, you interviewing with everybody except Black Radio. What's the problem? He went to Miles College, went to an HBCU. He said, wait a minute, I support HBCUs. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi. I'm like, I'm part of D9. We chatted that day. And he and I started to have a conversation. And so I started interviewing him. When I started interviewing him, and at the time, Mr. Cosby was on trial. Yeah. So, he wasn't available. So I started interviewing Andrew. And I always believe, as a learning moment as talent, give people access and give them opportunity. One, give them access to your show. And number two, give them an opportunity to tell this story. Now, I'm no shrinking violet. I'm going to ask you the tough questions, but I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to ask you the hard hitting questions. Yep. And I know the answer. And I never ask a question I don't know the answer to. Never. So I spent 3.5 years interviewing Andrew. And then finally, when he was found guilty in the second trial, he said, hey, Mr. Cosby wants to talk to you. And I spoke to him twice from prison, privately. And I just wanted to hear his story, especially as I was articulating it. He told me some things on the record, and he told me some things off the record. And that's one of the things about integrity. I never would if I spoke to somebody off the record, would repeat what they said publicly to anybody. And so I was speaking to Mr. Cosby that last time when it was going to the Commonwealth Supreme Court. And I said, listen. And I said, Frank, go for it. I said, listen, I'm just going to ask you a question. When the time comes and you are released, can I be the first person to get that interview? He said, absolutely. Now, let me say this to Morganites. Bill Cosby applied to Morgan State University as a freshman. He wanted to run track and field. Coach Hurt Jim that y'all see on
Mhm.
campus, Hurt Jim, he was a real person. I knew Coach Hurt. You know, he's older man, had retired by that time. Coach Hurt wouldn't give him a scholarship. He didn't think he was fast enough.
Oh my
Mr.
goodness.
Cosby tells me that story all the time. So he calls me home team. He says, "Hey, home team," you know. But he actually applied to Morgan, and Coach Hurt didn't think that he was fast enough because Bill Cosby could have been a graduate of Morgan State University. I'm just saying,
You know.
but they didn't think he was fast enough. Just a little historic fact for my Morganites. But in that lab, and I said, "Oh, Frankie, you gonna ask him? You gonna ask him?" I'm like, "This is Bill Cosby." Yeah, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm like, he's calling me. So I said, "Look, you know, don't be afraid of the word no." I said, "Mr. Cosby, no matter how this goes, and I'd like to think, you know, if you're released, and you believe you will be, after the state Supreme Court rules, can I get that first interview?" He said, "You absolutely can." I said, "I'm gonna hold you to that." He said, "Do that." A year later, I get a phone call the night before. Something's happening. Something's happening. I was like, "What?" Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah.
So I'm on my phone. I don't see anything. I don't see anything. The next day, the media starts to get reports. So you see breaking news.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby, you know, he may be released today. So I called two sources very close to the situation. And they're like, "Yeah, I heard he's going to get out." Very interesting piece. So I spoke with my source, my connection, called Andrew. I said, "Andrew," he said, "Frankie, let me call you right back." And I knew then. And I had my phone. I was like, I'm not going to miss it. I'm not going to miss this. But long story short, Andrew called me back and he said, "Hey, Frankie, I'm at the prison picking up Mr. Bill Cosby." I said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "No." He said, "We're getting ready to get in the car." So I'm watching all the major networks locally. I've got all the screens on.
Yep.
And they're like, "Oh," and all of the professional people, "Come on, HBCU. All professional folk on all these networks and the national networks, well, and all these lawyers, well, he probably won't get out until Monday because the paperwork is going to be this, and he's got to go through this vetting process before he gets out." I'm on my phone with the guy. He's saying to me, "Frankie, we're in the car."
Oh.
He said, "We're going to get him home, and as soon as we get him to get a physical, we're going to get him some bottled water because we got him out before breakfast. I'm going to call you and get Mr. Cosby on the phone." I called everybody. I called all my producers. I called my I said, "Hey," and somebody was like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Uh-huh." So Andrew had our call-in number to the radio station, and I'm sitting there the whole time, and I'm looking at the phone. Andrew called my cell phone.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, instead of calling the on-air line, he called my cell phone. And I'm like, "Oh, my God." So I'm sitting there. Andrew's like, "Frankie, Mr. Cosby is coming down the hall.
Yeah.
You want to talk to him?" "Yes." And I didn't want to say, "Hang up and call the other line." So I said, "Listen, I do community theater. I could glue a house together if I had to." I put my phone on speaker, put the phone up to the microphone, and he was like, "Frankie?" I was like, "Mr. Cosby." He said, "I'm home." I said, "I heard." And I literally did that interview with Mr. Cosby with the microphone live on the air with my phone because I didn't want to take an opportunity
And
hang up. I was like, we can make it work. So, yeah, that's my Bill Cosby story. And I get such a high doing stories like that. Yeah.
That is amazing. And so you spoke about you said glue a house together.
Yes, honey.
So let's talk about it. Miss Frankie has a play, an amazing stage play that she wrote, right?
Yeah.
Called Conversations for Sisters Only.
Mm-hmm.
So what inspired the story behind the play?
So I loved theater.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at Morgan, I wanted to be a part of the Ira Aldrich players. But at the time, our coach, you know, they were paying for our education, didn't want us to do a whole lot of other stuff. And because it was during the school year, I couldn't do the Ira Aldrich players and play ball. So 15 years ago, 16 maybe, when I was in Detroit, I got this radio thing down to a science. And so I did Intozaki Shinge's for Colored Girls. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And so I started doing theater.
Were you in it or did you?
No, I won't be in it. I'm in front of the mic, doing the radio thing. I
But
just
you're
like producing
behind
and
the scenes.
directing.
That's what I like too.
totally
Yep.
behind the scenes. It's almost like giving birth. I have one
Yep.
daughter. It's like giving birth. You watch it grow. So I ended up doing Intozaki Shinge's for Color Girls, and I wrote a book in 2004 called Conversations for Sisters Only. So my girlfriend, who has been with me forever, she and her husband and everybody's like, Frankie, you love to write. You wrote a book, because I had writer's block. I was like, if I'm going to write my own play, because it costs so much to get licensed to do somebody else's show.
Mhm.
She's like, we were all out one night, and they were like, Frankie, write your own. I was like, So I was actually on the plane on my way to South Africa. We talked about that
Mhm.
before the show. And I said, write. And I said, write what you know. Being a woman, being a black woman,
Yep.
and a black woman's experience, and put it on the stage, and we go there. So we put the show up in 2018, and we did 4 shows. COVID hit. We're going to do a 5th one, but COVID hit. Came back in 21, did 2 more shows. Took the show to Detroit in 2023 and in 2022, and did 2 shows there. Then 2 shows in November of 23, and now we're performing in Virginia Beach in June of 2024. So
That's
I'm
amazing.
excited about that. So yeah, I love it. I like it, which kind of is like the entertainment, but it is entertainment.
Yeah.
I just like the whole theater of the mind.
Mm.
I like being able to take what you have written, see it come to life,
Yeah.
watch it morph into this thing, and most importantly, from what I've written, where I wanted people to laugh, they did. Where I wanted them to cry, they did. To be able to move people in that way, like I do on the air, is just amazing for me.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, because I love, behind the scenes when it comes to theater, because, like I said, I do music and stuff like that. So I just
You should
love
write a
that.
song for my show.
Oh, Lord.
You should write a song for my show.
Okay, why not?
Write a song for my show.
Because I was thinking, when you talk about parts where you wanted people to cry, wanted them to laugh, but, being able to see people, reciprocate that.
Yeah.
I
Evoke
think that-
emotion on your work.
That's amazing.
Why not?
Yeah.
Right? And if you're really in tune to the people around you, or the greater world, the greater universe, and you can impact those people with a
Yeah.
song you wrote, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
Right? That's amazing.
When it comes to, the work, you do, and obviously, you get criticism, feedback, but how do you take that when it comes to, you actually being the one writing it, producing it? And
In terms
putting
of
it out?
criticism,
Yeah.
I really don't care what people think.
I know that's right.
That part.
Come on now.
Now, you write me a check.
That's a little
You know.
bit.
Now, David E. Talbert, who is a Morgan State University graduate, wrote Jingle Jangle, did a
Yes.
number of those shows. Good friend of mine. And I called him. I sent him the script, chatted with him, and said, hey, what do you think? Now, I am my own worst critic, too,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't just write something and throw
And
it up
put it
there.
out. You
Right.
did
I
everything
did a
before.
process, and I shared it with my sister. And when my sister came to the first show, she was like, we were, and so she saw one of the scenes. She was like, we were talking about that in my kitchen. Why not?
Yeah.
Life is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. Do everything your heart desire. And I love your generation of people, because you don't have to just do one thing.
You can do it.
You
one
want to
thing.
focus. You want to be able to knock down one thing that'll keep a roof over your head and food on your table. But, there was a time where if you worked at Ford's, with an S, if you worked at Ford, that's what you did, and that's all you did.
Yeah.
I'm saying to you all, with the advent of technology, the fact that we used to say, 5-6 degrees of separation, now we're only 1 degree of separation.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. Sample it, do it. See what happens.
So I know you mentioned your daughter a
Yes.
while back. We love her. So talk to me about her scholarship that she has in your mother's name, which I think
Yeah.
is amazing. Just, for me, obviously being from Detroit, and really without the support of my Detroit community and
Yeah.
allowing me to, go to school, I think that's just amazing,
Yeah.
what she's doing. So you can.
Yeah. So my mom, just a super incredible lady, God bless her. And, when I went through my divorce, my mom moved to Detroit
Yep.
and helped me raise my daughter. So they were frickin' frack. from the beginning. My mother's a breast cancer survivor, lived 20 years breast cancer free, and so am I. It was her influence and diagnosis that started the Sister Strut that is still going on today. So my daughter has been, and anybody in Detroit that knows me, and you saw me in most cases, you saw, my daughter. So she attended Spelman College. That's where she went undergrad. My mother passed away just after her. Well, let me go back. Her junior year, when my mother was diagnosed with dementia, she started to decline quickly. And Fallon said, I want to do a scholarship. And we started, just her and I and some friends, and started giving away $500 book scholarships. And, everybody gets to school, and then all of a sudden, the book is what? $400. Yeah. I'm like, the Bible doesn't cost $400. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of the books are as much as the Bible costs. So she thought that, I want to be able to do something, and in the name, and what the other thing, because, I got to think about tattoos, right? She loved Detroit so much, she said, I want to show you something. She got a 313 tattoo.
As she should. Shout out to her. That's some real love right there.
They said, but you can't see it unless I'm, in a bathing suit. But she loves her hometown. Yeah. And she said, I want to be able to do something. And, she was living in Atlanta. Even after graduation, she went up to University of Boston. Boston University to work on her master's degree in medical mental health, and flew as quick as she could back to Atlanta. So she's an Atlantean, or whatever they call them. She's
just like her mom.
Yeah, right.
And claim her everywhere.
Right. So she started, and so I said to her, do you want to expand it? What do you think? And she said, no, I want to keep the scholarship, in my hometown in Detroit. So we raise money every year to give away $500 book scholarships.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's all good.
Yeah. And then another question I want to ask you. So just for the fun of it, what's your favorite all-time person that you ever interviewed?
Oh, favorite all-time.
If you can't do one, you give me top 3.
Man, when I think about who did I have a lot of fun with? I mean, there's so many.
I know. I saw.
Who did I have a lot of fun with? Detroit's Kim, cool guy, one of the coolest guys, on the planet. I had a lot of fun with Charlie Wilson.
Okay.
When he's on fire, he's on fire. Man, a lot of actors that I've been around. Was I'm kind of mad at one of them. I'm not gonna say his name, but So I've had a good time.
I think one of my favorite ones, your recent one. It was a small one, but big to me. You did LaRoyce Hawkins.
I did, honey.
When I tell you, I texted you immediately.
Immediately.
Let me tell you what happened. I'm on Instagram, and I was on his story, and I'm like, this say Frankie Darcell.
I know her.
So then I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I basically know LaRoyce Hawkins because Miss Frankie knows him. And I was like,
LaRoyce was the bomb.
I love Chicago PD.
Love it. And do you know, his passion is comedy.
Yes, he does comedy, poetry, spoken
So guess
word.
what? I spoke with him. Mm-hmm. He said he'd love to come into Philadelphia to do a comedy show. So I said, we're going to make that happen. So going to reach out to his people, and he's all in. We just got to figure out what date works. And you could be, be my stage manager. You could be my stage manager. And, and plus he's fine. He's just fine as frog hair, honey. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I was like, Lord have mercy. Now, for my generation, I told him, I said, I can't even think of a person, but you just remind me of the Billy D. He was like, I'm so honey, he didn't know. I was like, ooh. Now, I would have loved to have had him in the studio. Just a good guy.
Miss Frankie was literally me. She was speaking for all of us who are just so in love.
Oh, I know, right? And as much as I liked him when I interviewed him and I posted it, you should have seen I'm not going to say, from your generation to women I noticed in this, girl, they all love him. He could have his pick of age. And I don't know if he do cougars or not. Or whatever. But women love
Shout out to LaRoyce Hawkins.
Yeah.
If you don't know who he is, go watch Chicago PD.
I know. That was funny. When I got your text, it said, Frankie!
I was so excited.
I said, what did you? I said, you saw the post.
Yes.
It was crazy how people responded to that interview.
Whole year.
Yeah,
I was like, I basically know the man.
Yeah, you know what? But he is so focused. I loved him. talking about his relationship with
Yeah.
his father, and I think some of what I posted might have been a portion of the
Yeah.
interview, but he talked so much about his dad and his relationship with his grandfather, and then he talked
And
about
also
his
how
mom.
his life influences his role on the
Absolutely.
screen, which I
Just
think is
good guy.
amazing.
Good
Yeah.
guy. Good guy. Yeah, I agree with you on
That's
that
gonna
one.
be
That
an
was a good one.
amazing show, whatever
Yeah,
y'all do
yeah,
together.
yeah.
That'll be
We
Come
when we
on
do-
now. Let's manifest
we
it.
do. Speak it into the universe.
So, okay, before we leave, I want to ask you, what is your favorite thing that you miss most about Detroit? Because you've been in Philly past 10 years.
10 years,
Yep.
yeah. So for the first 8 years, I was flying back and forth because I was still
I
doing.
know, that's what I told my mom. I was
Yeah.
like, she's dedicated. Going back
Yeah.
and mom was like, she's
Going back and
flying,
forth.
driving.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
she's going
yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah, I can tell you when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, my two physicians who were my mom's physicians were in Detroit. I was
You're
diagnosed.
at Henry Ford, right?
I was but I was diagnosed here in
Okay.
Philadelphia with great respect to all of the incredible physicians I know here in Philly. But there was no one that was going to do my surgery but Dr. Lisa Newman and Dr. Walker. I flew back and forth for 3 weeks to have my surgery. Then I stayed in Detroit for 6 weeks to do my radiation treatment. And then I flew back and forth. I literally would get on the plane at 7 in the morning, go see my physicians, get on a plane at 8:30 and come back to Philly. That's how much I love
Yeah.
and knew people in Detroit.
Yep.
And then they introduced me to my wonderful Dr. God rest her soul, Dr. Mitchell here in Philadelphia. So Philadelphia has some wonderful, wonderful physicians. But I came into myself in Detroit. I worked for an incredible program director named Steve Hegwood who hired me. I'll use this as an opportunity as well. Verna Green, who was the general manager at the time, Anna Soror, and they really just said, hey, this is the talent you have. This is Detroit, 86% African American, 52% of those people are women. I want you to put men off the table, just talk to those women and have fun. And they paid me a lot of money to do it,
That's right.
And so I felt like I came into myself. I was married at the time we first moved there, then gave birth to my daughter. So Detroit, I lived in Detroit more than I lived anywhere else in my life. Born and raised in Brooklyn. My family's in Virginia. Then, I moved around the country. So I was in Detroit for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And so I consider to this day at home, and some of the best relationships I have in my life are still there. And, they have planes, trains, and buses. I don't do buses, but they have planes, trains. So I still have a great relationship in Detroit and still do quite a few things there. But Detroit, gave me my wings. I
Yeah.
love the history of that incredible city. I love the people there. My nephew was murdered there. That's a sore spot. But I think, just, that's just how important
So
it
a lot
was
happened
when it
there. Yeah.
became home.
Mhm.
It literally is home. And I get asked the question all the time, would you come back? Would you live here?
Yeah.
I can say this, the weather, I don't miss.
Yeah, it's so
The weather, I
bipolar
don't
over
miss.
there.
Yeah, it's cold. Here on the East Coast, we get winter, spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah.
In
Michigan,
Detroit, it's winter, summer.
winter, week of summer, winter.
Summer, winter, summer, winter. But I love Detroit, and Detroit will forever be one of my favorite places on the planet.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously from there. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
But being school in Baltimore, I think it's just like I love to visit. Obviously it's my home, but I do because I've done a lot in Detroit. With the music, DSO, Michigan State, all those places. I think it's just my creativeness was found it there.
Absolutely.
I think it definitely fueled,
Absolutely. And the thing about
everything.
Detroit is the access to opportunity
Oh, absolutely.
is amazing.
You got Motown.
Absolutely.
Shout out
And
to all
and
my
the fact, and
Motown
again,
people.
the other piece when I got the phone call about your other girlfriend, and
Yeah.
it's like, hey, and her friend Hannah is going to Morgan. Oh, well, introduce us. Detroit, Morgan. Absolutely, I've got to meet her. And it's just that connectivity.
Yep.
It is that thing about Detroit and Detroiters that make
just
you
love each
unique.
other.
Yeah, that makes it very unique.
If you're
That makes
saying
it
what up
unique.
though, like
What up, though?
that's a
Right.
big thing.
Right. I would only say stop calling 6 Mile 6 Mile. It's McNichols.
It's McNichols. Okay.
That's a Detroit thing.
It's
That's
McNichols, everyone.
That's a Detroit thing. They know, if you're from Detroit, you know exactly why we're giggling.
So my last thing I want to ask: what piece of advice would you give someone like you, or someone who was in your shoes when you
Yeah.
were at Morgan, or even before then, but just who had, I would say, a dream, but then kind of changed a little,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
as successful as you are now.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to have to pivot
Yeah.
and do something different. No does not mean no. It just means not
Not
now,
right
right?
now.
Take your chances. You guys are young. Travel, see the world. Life ain't that serious. Make the best of it you can and put in the work. Get up when everybody else is sleeping. Stay up at night when everybody else went to bed. Access people without being over aggressive. Relationships are the thing that'll move you forward. I can tell you, nobody asked me when was the first transatlantic, telecommunication signal. My career has been through how I've treated people, how they've treated me, and I just put in the work.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of that. Go for it. Have a great time doing it too, and make a lot of money.
I know that's right.
And make a lot of money.
Make a lot of
Make
money.
a lot of money. Make a lot of money.
That is so nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
You're amazing.
And let me say to you, wait before you go.
Okay.
I wish you nothing but the very best.
Thank you so much.
I say this to you as a professional, and you talked about being nervous.
Yeah.
Just in this space, you did excellent.
Thank you.
Very well prepared. Your spacing, your timing on doing interviews, your research was on point. You mentioned some things. I was like, oh, she did read, But if this is the space that you want to be in, you're well on your way. So I just wanted to say, great job.
Thank you.
Great job to you. Great
guys,
job to
this
you.
is such
Great
a big
job
deal.
to you.
Oh my
Yeah. Great job to you.
Well,
Proud
make
of
sure you follow Miss Frankie Darcell.
Yes.
I'll put it in the juice wherever, YouTube, all the things, what the kids do these days.
Thank you guys.
But
This
thank
has
you
been
so
fun.
much.
This has
And
been fun.
I will see you guys in the next
Yeah, to your
episode.
friend over there with you.
Woo-woo. Okay.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Go Morgan!